Hello everyone, this is Lynn Webb and I am here to teach you about business for health providers today. So welcome to this session. It's kind of a specialized session in that it's really for massage therapists and acupuncturists is who we have attracted to this one, but there might be some people here who are just simply in the health industry that are also joining us. So a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So the first thing to know is that this is live, so anything could happen. I'm going to share my screens. I'm sitting at my office. I have two screens. On this side, if I'm looking this way, it's because this is where the presentation's actually happening. And if I'm looking this way, this is because that's the screen where I have my notes and I'm kind of watching what's happening with the webinar. So you know, I'm going to be looking at the screen, also talking directly to you. May technology be good to us today. It isn't always. So just give me a second and I'm just going to put some stuff up here. Okay, perfect. So you should be seeing right now my PowerPoint screen, and in the corner you should be seeing a picture of me. So hopefully that's working for you and your technology is working good. Now, just because I'm not sure who's in the room, what I'd really like to do is just check in. If you could just put a comment in chat. On this screen I have the chat running and I can sort of see what people are writing in the chat. So I want to see who's in the room. Who do I have for massage therapists? Who do I have for acupuncture students? Or maybe there's something else that you're doing. Just throw in the chat what your profession is and we'll sort of watch that come through. Massage therapist, thanks Jesse. Another massage therapist, thanks Chad. Great, acupuncture, massage therapist. Look, looks like we have a bunch of massage therapists. Excellent. So I have a bit of an agenda today, but I want to make sure that we're gearing all of the topics towards the questions. So at some point in time in this webinar, I'm hoping to get to all of the questions. So if there's anything that you really wanted to hear, jot that into the chat. And I'm just going to take a look and we'll see sort of what questions you want to know. I'm going to take a minute just to let people read. Chad says, paperwork's confusing. That's very true. Marnie says, what do I need to do for taxes? We're going to answer that. GST, that's also very common. Great. Okay, perfect. I think you're in the right place. We're going to answer a lot of these questions. And they're all really common. So some of the things that we're going to hear today are we're going to talk a little bit about GST and write-offs and writing off your vehicle. And I'm honing in on the vehicle because it's a cool write-off that you're going to find out about. Your bank account and your spending habits and personal taxes, those are the things that we're going to cover in the learning today. Now, I have a bonus for you. If you hang out till the end, we have a free course that we actually give away, and you'll find out why we're giving it away. There's just not possibly enough time to cover everything in this course. And one of the areas that I really think should be covered after you learn this material is how to do your books. So if you hang around till the end, at the very end, I'm going to show you how to take advantage of that bonus. Okay, so I want to get started with a little bit of a story. So up until a few months ago, I owned a professional bookkeeping and accounting firm. And we did a lot of tax returns, and I also teach as well. But one of the things that I teach is at a university to massage therapists and acupuncturists. So I met a young lady there. She's about 30 years old. She had a husband and a few kids, and she decided when her kids got of age, she went back to school and to become a massage therapist. And that's when I came in. That's when she met me. We did a course. And at tax time, because I also do taxes, at tax time she brought her papers to me and I immediately noted how small her stack of paperwork was. So I was a little bit concerned because a small stack of paper usually potentially means something's going wrong. But I let her ask her questions and they were pretty typical. What do I do about GST? How do I keep track of my write-offs? How do I do my books? All really common questions. So I took her paperwork and I started flipping through it. And she had some receipts for some lotion, which was good. She bought some knickknacks for her office. She worked from home, plus she also had clinic that she worked part-time at. And then she had a little shelf she had bought. And I remember saying to her, what about your vehicle? Where's your fuel receipts? And she said, well, I'm home-based, so I can't write off my vehicle, can I? And I thought, uh-oh, something's going to go wrong here. And then I asked her things like, what about paper and supplies for your office? And I remember her saying to me, they're just little. So I didn't keep track of it. And my spidey sense starts going off. And I'm thinking, in my mind as tax preparer, I'm already knowing now that it's going to be very difficult for me to save taxes for this young lady, which breaks my heart. And she also asked me a question in chatting about GST. And the clinic that she was working for paid her 60% at the 60-40 split, which is really common. But she was getting paid GST on that. She really didn't understand that GST. And I also, by this time, my spidey sense is really going off. That GST is actually a really critical component because she didn't understand the GST, and therefore I knew she probably didn't have it in the bank, which was probably going to be an issue by the time we're done our tax return. So as it stood, she didn't make a whole lot of money in her business, which was kind of a good thing because she was just starting out. But her husband had made a lot of money and there was some conflict there. So at the end of the day, she just didn't do the right things all year. And then she came to me at tax time and it was really difficult for me to help her. And I know that that's really common. We saw a lot of people in that same boat. And what I want to say to you today is don't panic. This webinar is not here to make you panic. There's some things that you can do to kind of catch up and go back. But the point of the story that I really wanted to say is you want to know before you start your year rather than at tax time, because at tax time, there's not a whole lot that you can do. So before we get going, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me so that you know who you're learning from. So I have been in the numbers business forever. I owned a professional bookkeeping and accounting firm for about just over 10 years, which I sold a couple of months ago. And I started this business, which is Entrepreneurial Intelligence by myself, Lynn Webb. I'm also a tax preparer and I do personal tax in Canada. So I understand all the bookkeeping and the accounting and the taxes. So I have a really, really good overall view of what businesses need to happen. In fairness, though, I hadn't really actually done the work for quite a few years. I spent a lot of my time as the business owner running my business, but educating small businesses. And I worked in the corporate world as well. And my passion is really for small businesses. There's a huge gap where people just simply don't know where to go or where the resources are to really help them out. And it's confusing. It's super simple for me, but it's confusing for people like you that just really don't know what the answers are going to be. And when every time you look online, you read it and you think, is this Canadian or American content? So that's sort of how I got into this business. I also teach at a local university, and I teach the business component to massage therapists and acupuncturists for the business component of their diploma or their degree. And the textbook we use is one that I wrote. It's called Business for Alberta Health Providers. Now that book, you could get it on Amazon if you wanted to, but it covers things like MVAs and WCD and privacy issues and all of those things that you need to know. But for this webinar, we're just really going to be covering the financial side of life. So let's get started. So I'm always really worried in the beginning process because it seems like I'm going to give you all the negative stuff, and I'm really not trying to do that. I'm not trying to deter you from being self-employed at all, because I'm self-employed and I love it. But Canada Revenue Agency makes the rules, and they're not going to be the most informative people in your life. So my role here is to help you navigate the rules for the Canada Revenue Agency. The first thing you need to know, oh, welcome. We've got a few more people I just noticed in chat come in. Welcome to our webinar. The first thing you need to know when you're in business is that there's only really two ways to file your taxes. There's as an employee or self-employed, so in business or a subcontractor. Now, the thing you need to know, the in business or a subcontractor, the liabilities, whether you are a brick and mortar and you have employees, is the same as if you're a subcontractor. It's still called in business, and your taxes are done relatively the same way. an important piece is you are legally responsible. Now, any errors in the process from getting your books done all the way up to the tax return end up being your responsibility. So if you get the information wrong and you give it to your accountant, the accountant is only responsible to do the information as you give it to him. Their job as a tax preparer and accountant is not to validate that the information is correct. And I know that sometimes people think, oh, I gave it to the accountant, it must be correct. Not true. The information they use is the information you gave them. So if you do it wrong, and then the accountant does it wrong, and the tax return's done wrong, and it goes to CRA wrong, what you need to know is any liabilities that fall out of that or any penalties fall on your shoulders and no one else's shoulders. And because of that, it's super simple that you really understand what the background, the underlying piece is. What's also important to understand is if you took it to 5 different accountants, you would get 5 different tax returns. And that's because the Income Tax Act, is yay thick. And it uses the word reasonable so many times that the answers about what's right and what's wrong is subjective. So an accountant will make a decision based upon his knowledge and experience about that particular matter. And every accountant's going to be different. And it will vary. And I know people think that's hard to believe, that how could it be? It's just math and the rate. But there's lots and lots of different areas that accountants will have different answers. Super important that you gel with them and they really connect to, it really connects to what you want out of an accountant and what you believe in. So let's get right into the first one, which is GST. Now, GST applies to massage therapists, and if you're an acupuncturist in the room, it's a good time to grab yourself a tea, because I know acupuncturists have an exempt service unless you're selling a product other than seeing patients, then the GST applies to you as well. So most of what I'm going to talk about applies to massage therapists in here. So the GST for massage therapists can be a little bit tricky because there's the therapist, the clinic, and the customer. And a lot of massage therapists, in my opinion, work for a clinic. Some work out of their home as well, but most, I think, work for a clinic. So we're going to talk about the clinical situation in this webinar. So what the transaction, the way it usually occurs, is the clinic charges for the massage. We're going to use $100. They add GST of $5, and then the customer gets charged $105. Now, if you're self-employed, which probably 99% of massage therapists are going to be self-employed when you work for a clinic, the way that it works is normally, and I say normally, sometimes this can change, there's a split. So let's say it's 60-40 split. So the therapist gets paid 60% of the service. So it doesn't include the GST, just service, so 60% of the service. So in this particular example, the therapist is paid $60, right? Following that so far, that's pretty fairly self-explanatory. Then what happens is the therapist should issue an invoice to the clinic in the amount of $60 for that particular service. If you're registered for GST, you're going to add $3, so your total bill is $63. Now that's the normal way a transaction works with GST. Now notice I said invoice. Sometimes the clinic will just simply print you out a report saying these were the people that you saw, this is how much you made. But Canada Revenue Agency is going to look for an invoice of some kind. So doing the invoice is actually a fairly important step that you should be doing. Now I say if you're registered for GST. So let's talk about the GST, because that can be kind of confusing for people. So you have to register for GST when you make $30,000 in a 1-year period. Now I'm not talking about 2017, you made $30,000, 2018, you made $30,000. I'm talking about any 12-month period. So if this is February now, and let's say I started as a massage therapist in August. So if I made $30,000 between August and February, I now have to register for GST before I do my $30,001. So you always have to know, you have to go back all the time and see what did I do in the last 12 months? And to do that, obviously, you should be doing your books. But so if this is February right now, I need to go back to last March and add up my sales between March and now to see if I've hit $30,000 in sales. Now, in the clinical situation, the sale is what you charge the clinic. So in our example of the $60, it would be the $60 that you charge the clinic. Okay. And if you don't register, the government will do it for you. And that's on your tax return or after your tax return is done. And then they will charge you the GST that you should have charged. So you don't want to get that one wrong. You want to make sure that you're keeping track of your sales and that you, when you're right at that $30,000 mark, you register. Now, once you register, you are done. And you're done. Like you always have to stay registered until you have a full cycle, a full year that is under $30,000, and then you can deregister. To register, super easy. You call the Canada Revenue Agency, and this is the phone number, 1-800-959-5525. And they will give you a GST number. So you say, hi, my name is, Sally Black, and I want to register for GST. They will ask you your social insurance number, which you will give them, and they will give you back a 9-digit number, and it will end with RT0001. So the 9-digit number is your business number. Usually it starts with an 88500 something. So let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, RT0001. Your business number always stays the same from that point forward. What changes is the suffix RT0001. They are going to ask you, just one second. See, it's live. Anything could happen. They are going to ask you whether you want to register monthly, quarterly, or yearly. Now, the choice is yours. I never recommend monthly because what they're saying is when do you want to register? What they're really saying is, how often do you want to do all the GST paperwork and send it to us and pay us? Now, monthly is fine, except you have to have your books done monthly. And if you don't get it on time, then you have this big penalty for not doing it on time. So I always say monthly is really it's not feasible. It's not realistic. Now, quarterly, and you can pick whichever 3 quarters. It can be January, February, March, and then April, May, June, etc. Or you can pick different quarters. It's entirely up to you. So that means that the paperwork has to be filed and paid on a quarterly basis. And yearly, as a slight modification, means you have to file your paperwork once a year, which is usually done with your tax return. But you have to, a lot of people, not everybody, but you have to pay them in quarterly installments. And there's some rules around that that you would need to know. Now, as we go along, this is a really good segue for me to tell you that there's a course that we do called Business for Newbies, and we cover a whole bunch of it. I'm going to tell you about it a little bit later on, but we cover this GST part really in depth in I think it's module 4, Canada Revenue Agency. So just a mental note, if you're interested in looking at the course and you really have a problem with GST, that would be the place where you really want to go. Okay, once you've registered for GST, from that moment forward, you would need to charge GST on all of your sales. So anything that you charged a customer or a clinic, you would put GST on that. Your GST number has to be on all of the invoices. So that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 RT0001, you would put that on your invoice. And remit your GST on time. Even if there's no GST, you still need to send in a reconciliation. And don't be late, because there certainly is penalties and interest. Now, if you're here because you have to do a GST return and you've gotten that paper from the government, which is kind of government-y looking and has big words and sometimes you don't all know what they mean, then in the Business for Newbies class, we actually have a module in there which is how to do your GST return. Now, it is under, it's being revised right now just because they changed the forms, so we're redoing it with the forms. But that is in that class, but it will be released also as one of our free courses a little ways down the road. If you have, when you signed up for the webinar, if you've said, yes, sign me up for all notifications, you're going to get that notification immediately, and it will tell you when that course has been released. Okay, Questions on GST? If you do, jot it into the chat. I do have the chat open on this screen and I am watching it. So if you have questions, jot it in there and we will see if I can answer them as we go along. And we have a Q&A right at the very, very end, which will answer pretty much most of the questions that come through. So let's talk about write-offs. Now, write-offs is probably the place where I get the most questions. So I'm going to try to cover it as much as I can. We only have an hour, so it's going to be a little bit condensed, but let's see if I can get through it. So a write-off is a cost that you reasonably incurred in order to make money in your business. It usually is associated with a receipt of some kind, and it affects your profit or the amount that you're taxed on. Now, let's just look at a real-life example of that. Let's say you had $10,000 in money that you charged your customers, or your clinic, and you have $1,000 of those little receipts, pieces of paper that are deemed write-offs, and we're going to talk about what those are in just a few minutes. That means you have $9,000 of leftover money. That $9,000 is the money that your taxes will be based upon. Does that make sense? So whatever this amount is, the $9,000 will be how your accountant starts to calculate the taxes. It is super important in the write-offs that you always keep your receipts separate. So if you buy something at the same time you're buying, let's say groceries, and you buy something else, always it should be a separate receipt, and it should always be paid from your business bank account. Now, if you don't have a business bank account, I'm hoping you will after this webinar, because we are going to talk about that and the reasons why you should in about 10 minutes. Okay, so let's talk about some examples. What is a write-off? So that they're the things that you buy in your business that you use up. They're things like lotions or needles or job supplies, things like office supplies or paper, fuel or insurance for your car. It can be also insurance for your home is also a write-off. It can be dues to your association or college. It can be traveling for business. It can be trade shows or other learning opportunities. It can also be meals or coffee. These are all really good examples of write-offs. Every time you do something and you're doing it for business, it usually generates a piece of paper, and that piece of paper can be a write-off. One of the absolute best write-offs, in my opinion, for your industry is one called a vehicle expense. Hands down, this is the place where massage therapists and acupuncture, health providers in general, far underestimate, and it can give you an excellent write-off. And I'm going to show you how and why you can use that to drive your taxes down, which is, of course, the place where we always want to be. Okay. The thing about write-offs, excuse me, is that it is situationally dependent. It's a little bit tricky in your industry, and you have to analyze the situation to see exactly what applies. So the rules around your vehicle is you cannot write off kilometers to a regular place of business. So if you only have one clinic, you can't write off the kilometers to go there and to go home. That's a no-go. But if you work at more than one clinic, or you're home-based and you have a clinic, or maybe you teach, or you do workshops, or you have something else, you can write off all of those kilometers at that point to go to any of those. So you have to decide what is your business and exactly how it applies. So now that you know that, we're also going to talk about the kilometers for every time you went to the receipt. So for example, when I went to the office supply place, or I went for a coffee, all of those things that you do for business, I'm going to give you some examples of my own business right away. Those are all a write-off. So I always say to people, when you look at where you're recording kilometers, realistically, you have to record the kilometers for every time you have a piece of paper in your business or a receipt. Sorry, I have a tickle. Okay, the rules about recording a kilometer what you should do is in January 1st, you record your odometer reading, whatever that is, 10,000 kilometers. And December 31st, you also record your odometer readings. Let's say it's $30,000. But you also have to have a way of recording your kilometers for every trip you take. The requirements by Revenue Canada are a date, where you went, why you went there, and what your kilometers are. So if I go to the bank, I'm going to say today is February the 18th, to the bank, 3 kilometers, and the why, well, that deposit, I don't know, it's self-explanatory, it's a bank. Now, it can be a little bit confusing, and sometimes people really underestimate, so I want to show you a couple of examples from my own business. Now, here's where we're going to get a little tech savvy, because what I want to do is I want to stop showing you my screen, and I want to start showing you me. So just 1 second, and let me do that. Aha, got it, good. Okay, so these are receipts from my own business, and I'm going to go through them with you and tell you what they are, so that you can maybe try to identify some examples in your own world. So the first receipt I have is to a local coffee shop, which is close to my office. And this was, I was meeting a potential client there because I meet small business people all the time. I had a coffee and a muffin, and I'm writing that off. So I paid for it with my business bank account. The second piece of paper I have is not a receipt, it's a business card. Now, we have a podcast that's coming up that's launching, I'm hoping in April 2018. I'm going to tell you about that in a few minutes. It's got lots of good stuff in it. But I had to take a class about how to do podcasts because I was a little bit confused about the technical side of it. And I registered for that podcast ages ago. So when I went, what I did is I picked up a business card because I remembered that I needed to do the kilometers for traveling there to do the course and, of course, back to my office. So sometimes a business card comes in handy. I have another piece of paper here, which is just, it's from a vendor at a trade show. It's meaningless, doesn't really say anything, but I had to go, in my business trade shows, I talk about small business owners all the time, and trade shows are a really important place for me to meet them. So I wrote off my admission to the trade show, and I grabbed one of the vendors I talked to, his stuff, as a reminder that I had to write off kilometers. And of course, there's the parking for the trade show, which sometimes feels like it's a month's salary. It's expensive, and so I needed to remember I need to write off the parking. This is a receipt for a meal that I had with some friends. So I was introducing a new course and a new module, and I really wasn't certain. I had some questions, and I needed a different perspective, because sometimes when you're sitting in my chair, you get really close and you don't know, you forget what people don't know. So I asked 3 of my friends to go for supper, and I would buy them supper if they would listen to me talk and give me feedback. And they did. So I bought their meal, but I have 2 pieces of paper here. Now, meals, you always have your receipt plus this little slip from paying for it, because this little slip is the one that will have the tip on it. Usually the bill doesn't have the tip, and don't forget this one, because this proves your tip. So you put them and staple them together. So I wrote that off. That was a good write-off, actually. This one is a business card. This is for my hair salon. Yes, I wrote off the kilometers to my hair salon, not to get my hair done, although she does a beautiful job, but she's self-employed, and I was talking about her course, and she's asked me, can you drop off some information? Well, absolutely I could, but I wasn't going there to get my hair done. I switched into business mode from personal mode, and I picked up her card to remind me I needed to write off my kilometers to go drop off that information. From a local, just a local hardware store, when I was setting up my webinar, I had a bunch of logistics. I got lights and the webcam, and I needed to buy some screws. And it's not very much. Well, it's $18. I guess those are pretty expensive screws, but I had to buy some supplies, and it's not very much, but I always keep track of those receipts, even for the little things. You're going to find out why in just a moment. Here is a little local place that has kind of cool things. I bought Christmas gifts here, and I bought about 10 Christmas gifts, and I delivered it to the customer. So this receipt, I wrote off what it cost me to get to the store and to get home. And I also wrote off the kilometers for every Christmas gift that I delivered to my clients, because I did that all in the name of business. This receipt is it's my groceries. And I don't write off my groceries, but what happened was I was at the grocery store and I saw some stuff, you know, one of these bulk stores, and they sell a little bit of everything. And I saw some stuff there that I needed. There's a little basket that I needed for my desk and some paper, and I picked that up and I put that through. And I didn't, it's on a separate receipt, so it's not the problem. The problem is I lost the receipt. So I kept the big receipt to say, don't forget to record your kilometers to the grocery store, because I did some business stuff there. But I'm also going to tell you what happens to lost receipts. So let me just jump back here, back to the presentation, and let's hope I get this right. Apologize. Okay. All right. Are we back? Perfect. Okay. So those are some examples from my own business. You should be looking at every single piece of paper that you have and saying, do I write off kilometers? You will be surprised, absolutely shocked at how fast those will accumulate. Now, when you record kilometers, there's different ways. You can write it in your log. There's also some apps out there. There's like MileIQ, which I've heard is really good, or that's MileIQ. I know a lot of people that use that one. There's also Driver Log, it's called. I know some people, I don't know if that one's good or not. I've never used it. I use a GPS tracker, which is called OdoTrack, ODOTRACK.ca. The OdoTrack plugs into my, under my dash of my car. It's got a funny name. It's a weird plug. Anyway, it plugs in there and it just follows me wherever I go, and it uploads my kilometers automatically to a web portal on the internet. So I can go in there at any time, and the only thing I have to do is say this was business, this was personal. But so I never forget kilometers. I love that product. But I also know that some of the products like MileIQ does it as well. And it might be a little bit cheaper. Okay. Write-offs really are the secret sauce to paying less taxes. And as a tax preparer, the place where I see people pay more taxes is because they don't pay attention to the write-offs. So I think that you just need to pay attention to how you're writing off, or to the things that you write off, sorry, and it will drive down your taxes. Now, I know that we kind of blew through write-offs. I felt like that was really quick. It was probably long for you, but it was really quick for me. So in our Business for Newbies class, we do one module just on write-offs. When I teach at the local university, we actually have a 3-hour class, and I dedicate it all towards write-offs just because there's always so many questions with it, and I get it. And if you have questions, I encourage you to throw them up in the chat, and I will answer them in the Q&A at the end. So, okay, let's move on. Sorry, a little off track. See, it's live. Anything can happen. All right. The next place we're going to talk about is how your personal taxes are affected. So if I say to you, you have to know what the write-offs are, then I also have to say to you, how does it affect your taxes, so that you can kind of understand. The secret really is getting more write-offs, paying less taxes. And that's true whether you're a subcontractor or you have a multi-million-dollar business. It's the same formula. That's how people save money on taxes. The basic tax formula is this. This is how personal taxes are basically calculated. The amount of money you charge your customers, let's say it's $40,000, minus your write-offs, $5,000, equals the amount that you're taxed on, which is $35,000. Now, an average person will pay tax between 25 and 35%. I'm going to use 25% in this particular example. So if you make $35,000, you're going to pay $8,750 in taxes. And we're going to modify that just a little bit. What if you got more write-offs? What if you kept track of your vehicle better? What if you thought differently about all the write-offs that you had and you kept different receipts? Well, let's say that you had $10,000 in write-offs now, which is really easy to do if you're doing your vehicle properly, which equals the amount you're taxed on, which is $30,000. Look at the amount of tax at the same 25%, $7,500. Let me just go back here for a minute. Oops, wrong way. $35,000 is $8,750 in tax. $30,000 is $7,500 in tax. So by keeping track of your write-offs, you actually save just over $1,200. That's a lot of money. It can be fairly significant. When you're starting out in your field, if you're new, then you know when you're starting out, it's hard to get clientele. You might not make enough money to live on, so you have another job. And I want to talk about that because that does catch people off guard a lot. So what's important to know is you're taxed on the total amount of money that you make all year. Let me just explain. Let's go to another slide. So if you have another job, let's say your self-employment's $10,000 and you have $2,000 in write-offs, so that leaves you $8,000 that you're taxed on. But it's added to all of your other earnings. So let's assume you made $40,000 at a job that you haven't yet left, trying to get your clientele up. So now you're taxed on $48,000 total. So that's $8,000 of self-employed plus the $40,000. And so that's $12,000 in tax. So you can see if you get your write-offs up, you have if say you went it to $4,000, then you would be taxed on less. Now look at the tax difference, $12,000 versus $11,500. So you want to try to make sure your personal taxes are changed. Every receipt that you have, regardless of, even if you think it's a small amount, if you have a $10 receipt in your hands, that is 30% taxes. So you're going to increase your tax bill by $3 if you throw it away. So if I buy a pack of paper, which is $10, that's an expensive pack of paper, but if I say, oh, it's only $10 and I throw that receipt away, I've increased my tax bill by $3. So it's really quite important that you keep all of your receipts because they really add up rather quite quickly. Okay, I do see some questions. I want to make sure that I get all the content in here, so just put them in the chat and I'm going to follow them here in just a moment. The last piece I'm going to talk about is your bank account and spending. So most people who go into practice go in as a sole proprietor. And the sole proprietor is someone who goes into business for yourself. So you say, I'm a subcontractor, I'm going to go into business. You're called a sole proprietor. You can incorporate, but usually that's reserved for people that are in a clinic. One of the things you want to do is you always want to have a separate business bank account, no matter what level you are. Now, a sole proprietor doesn't legally have to, but there are some very compelling reasons, which I'm going to tell you about in 2 seconds, why you would want to have a separate account. Your credit cards also should have a dedicated credit card that you just spend for business. Why do you want to have a separate business account? Well, in the case of a CRA audit, one of the first things they do is say, show me your bank accounts. Now remember, the CRA audit goes back 2 or 3 years. It's not last month, it's 2 or 3 years. And CRA will say, well, there was $500 that went into your account. What was that for? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know what it's for. It will immediately become income and you will be taxed on it. So that $500 could have been from a parent or a loan from a friend, or it could have been maybe you were at the casino and you won $500. It could be just about anything, but if you can't tell CRA what it's for, then they will deem it as income. When you keep your account separate, you set the intention that one is personal and one is income. It also is a nice bookkeeping shortcut for clarity. It reduces your accounting fees, and when you lose a receipt, like my grocery receipt that I lost, it will get picked up. I will still get to write that off, even though I don't have a piece of paper, because I have it on my bank statement. I'm kind of covered. So I know we have to go through it really quickly, and I apologize, but I want to recap what we kind of just learned. The GST, the write-offs, your vehicle, your bank account, and how it affects your taxes. There's some other things that we didn't cover in this webinar, and they include, if you're new, some of the first steps to take, the Canada Revenue Agency obligations, hiring an accountant, because that can be tough sometimes, write-offs in depth, something a little more in depth, and do-it-yourself bookkeeping. So the amount that you need to learn here, it really can't be done in an hour, but it can be done in a couple hours with some really good guidance. So I'm going to tell you about some resources that I'm going to leave with you. This product that we have is called Business for Newbies. On the screen on the left-hand side, you see the summary. On the right-hand side, you see all of the modules that's included in the Business for Newbies. So this is a great resource. You can go back to it time and time again, and it's broken up really nicely about, you know, which, in the section that you want to learn about specifically. Now, normally, Business for Newbies sells for $297, but all of my webinar folks get a coupon called Web Health. In this case, this is your coupon for this webinar, Web Health 218, and you get 30% off. So that's a savings of about $89. So that's for people who want to take a course and they want to have access to good Canadian information right away at a pace which is set for people. It's very simple. It uses simple language so that you can understand. You can understand the concept you need to learn. We also have live and online the same course, and we do a series of 6 live weekly webinars. And at any point in time, if you can't make the weekly webinar, no worries. You get the recorded webinar, and you get access to the replay, so you can watch it at your leisure. Those webinars live series are always done in small classes, so there's no more than 20 people, so that we can get individual attention and questions. You get 30 minutes one-on-one with me on the phone. So whatever your situation is, and keep in mind, I know a lot about accounting, a lot about bookkeeping, and a lot about taxes. So you can get whatever information you want to hit with me in 30 minutes. You get a free one-to-one included. You get full access to the Business for Newbies course. So the course that I just showed you, you get 100% access to that. And we just started a Facebook group, literally just started it last week. And that is a closed group because there's lots of questions. And I know some really good entrepreneurs out there, people who have been in the business, but I also know lawyers and payroll professionals, and they're coming into the group to be able to answer your questions. So it's a great place for you to have access. Normally $497 is what the live version sells for, but again, in the webinar, if you choose to have this as a resource, you get 30% off, so you save about $149. Now, the third resource that I want to talk to you about is a podcast, which is coming up, and I don't know if you're a podcaster, but if you are, it's a free podcast, costs you nothing. It's due to be released in April of 2018, and it's called Entrepreneurial Intelligence. So here's some of the stuff that the podcast covers. It talks about how being self-employed affects your credit rating and your ability to buy a house. That's a session we did. We talk about the technology such as QuickBooks and HubDoc and Xero and FreshBooks and DIY Expense Tracker and all of those. We have an interview with an accountant that tells us what CRA looks for. Excuse me. We have basic novice skills and techniques. So we talk about some of this stuff which really affects you. We haven't been able to get to it yet because there's been so many cool topics, but all the contents of the Business Newbies class with different guest speakers and how it applies to them. We also do some of the soft stuff, such as how to grow your business and success and failure stories from other business owners. And we actually did a session on spirituality and meditation and how it affects your business. That was kind of a cool one. Now, if you're worried about you want to be notified with the podcast, you can go to this link, and I will put it in the email, which will follow this. I'll put it in the email so that you can just simply join us, and you'll have some options about what you want to be emailed, because I really don't want to spam you. I want to send you only the information that you want. But this is the link where you would go to make sure that you're signed up. But again, I'm going to send you an email when this is done, and we're going to send you an email. It's going to have the replay for the webinar, so you can go back and watch it. It will have all the links that I sent to you, and it will also have this particular link in it. So all of that is coming. Okay. So let's get to the Q&A, and we have, oh good, I have 15 minutes for Q&A, which is awesome. I love this part. All right, so let me just look at the chat here, and let's see what some questions are. So Allison says, what about my home expenses? Yes, you're right. We didn't get to home expenses. As I go through the Q&A, if it relates to one of the modules that we did, I will reference over to that if I can. Now, you know what, let me just switch here because all right, there we go. So what about home expenses? Yes, true. So home expenses can be written off, and there is a formula, and we do explain the home expenses piece in the This is for Newbies class in Module 8, where it says, let's understand write-offs. So it's quite an in-depth course about write-offs. So absolutely you can. I also have a form that you can download. Oh, let me add that form. Actually, let me just make a note. Let me add that form to the email so you have that form which will come out, and it basically is a nice simple way to record your home-based expenses. Put that form on your fridge at the end of the year, take it down, give it to your accountant. They will love you for doing that. So that's in that module. Hopefully that answers your question. Terry asks, can I write off my car payment? The answer is no, but you can write off the interest. Vehicles are kind of a tricky write-off, and there's sort of multi-faceted write-off. So there's your payment, there's the depreciation, there's the travel. We do explain that all in Module 8 of the Business for Newbies class. So, but make sure you give your tax person your car payment, and it's different, by the way, whether it's a lease or a purchase. So make sure you have the statement about what you paid for your car payment, because you can write a portion of it off, yes. Let's see what other questions we have. Aaron asks, how should I do my own bookkeeping? I wish I had time to do that in this module. However, we do have, we cover it in Module 10 in DIY, in Business for Newbies, and it's called Basic and DIY Bookkeeping. So interestingly enough, that's not going to be our bonus at the end. I'm going to give you some free access to a course right at the end of this. So that's going to cover it, because I really, really think that it's a key part. And well, stay tuned. I'll tell you in the bonus. I want to get through some questions here, and you'll see in about 5 minutes. Beth says, I'm feeling this is a lot. Does it really apply to me? Yes, it does. So you can choose not to do the steps. Lots of people do. But the end result is that you're not doing yourself a favor, because you're paying more taxes, and in case you get audited, you're really exposed. So let me give you an example. If you've gone to the accountant, or you've already filed a business tax return, you might have been asked how many kilometers did you drive. And a lot of people don't keep the kilometer log, so you'll guess, I don't know, 10,000 kilometers. You tell your accountant, and your accountant will put 10,000 kilometers into the tax return. Now think about what you learned today. You're legally responsible if it's wrong. So if that $10,000 does not have a kilometer log, in CRA's world, it's wrong. So you give that to your accountant, he puts it on your taxes, and he files those taxes wrong, using a number which isn't justified, and you get the deduction. Now let's say CRA says, let's question this person, which happens a lot if you're a new business. They will send you a letter saying, please send us your kilometer log. And if you don't have a log, then they're going to take that deduction out, and you're going to be charged interest and penalties on that deduction. So the penalty falls on your shoulders. So you don't have to do a log. You can tell your accountant to claim it, and they will, but you really should. So it exposes you a little bit. So I always like to say, yes, you really should be doing a log. Okay. Marianne asks, can I write off my medical expenses? Yes, but those are done on your personal tax return. They are a deduction on your personal tax return. Now that's outside of this particular webinar. I do loosely explain that in Module 4 of Business for Newbies, which is the personal taxes section. But it's a tax reduction on your taxes. So you do keep your medical receipts, and you do turn them into your tax preparer to be done on your personal taxes. Marnie asks, can I use a program at home to do my taxes? I think you mean the ones that you download, if I'm correct. So do you mean the, oh, just a second, I've lost my chat. Just 1 second. So do you mean the ones that that you download and you put the information in and they do your taxes? For personal, yes. For business, I never recommend it, and I'll tell you why. The Income Tax Act that governs all of this is, it's quite thick. It's a large book, and it's subjective, and it uses the word reasonable an awful lot. The program has no way of saying what's reasonable. The program asks you a general question, you put in a general answer, and it does this calculation. But when you take your books to a tax preparer, if we're missing something that you should be doing, we're going to ask, where is blank? Where is blank? So I don't agree with the tax programs. I don't agree with the tax programs when you're in business. Now, I do cover kind of a whole host of reasons why, and I think that's in module 7 in the Business for Newbies. It's called Bookkeepers and Accountants. I think that's the module it's in, about why not to do it. I just don't recommend it. Inevitably, you'll pay more tax. I think we did a case study when I owned my business years ago, and the case study was about I asked some family and friends that did their own taxes and were in business, and I said, could I use you to do a case study? So they did it and we did it, and in every case we always did it better and we saved the money in taxes, except for one, and he just did it wrong. He claimed all kinds of stuff he shouldn't have claimed and didn't really understand that piece, so he paid less in taxes, but because he did it very incorrectly. So, you know, it's been proven to me, and I really just don't support that for a business unless you really know what you're doing. Okay, Manute says, how do I do my GST? I have a form from last year and I don't know what to do with it. Well, you're right. Those forms look awfully governmental in nature, don't they? And they have big words and you really don't know what they mean, and it's really not simple. My first instinct says give it to your tax preparer and they will do it. But if you want to do it yourself, in the Business for Newbies, there's a module there that says filling out your GST return, which is under construction right now because they changed the form. So now we have to redo it with the new forms. However, that same course is going to be released as a free course down the road. So if you have the notifications turned on, you will get notified with every course that's released, and that will be one of them. And I don't think that's too far down the road because most sole proprietors have to file their GST by June 15th. So we have to make sure that it's up and ready to go. So that's coming pretty soon. Okay, I'm just looking at the time and I want to make sure that we're all out of here on time. So there are a couple more questions, but I wish I could get to them all. I really wish I could get to them all. I want to tell you about your bonus. Here's your bonus. One of the modules is called Do-It-Yourself Bookkeeping. And in the Do-It-Yourself Bookkeeping is a module in the Business for Newbies. It's module 10. It's the exact same module that's in that course. We're going to give you that module today here for free. It'll come out in your email. You'll get a link, and all you have to do is click on it, sign up for the course, and you'll have access to the course. And this is what it's going to look like when you get there. The screen looks like this. And oops, just a second. I have to share my screen, I suppose, don't I? 1 minute. Let me just do the technology piece. Okay, good. So it looks like this. This is the, all you'll do is hit the Join Now button and you can see everything that it does. We're going to teach you the different types of bookkeeping that there is. There's 2 different types, and depending what you want to get out of it at the end of the year, you have to know the right way. You have to understand the 2 different ways to do it, or the 2 main ways. We're telling you how you should sort your paperwork. So if you have a shoebox, we're going to tell you the right way to sort your paperwork so that you pay the least amount of accounting fees, and it's the easiest job for your accountant. When you make it easy for your accountant, that means you're going to pay less taxes. There'll be less mistakes made. And we also help you decide, maybe you can do the work or maybe someone else can do the work, kind of help you walk through that decision. So all you need to do is when you get the link in the email immediately following this, you click this Join Now button and it will give you a screen which looks like this. Now, all of our courses, you have to log in to get to them, and you just simply fill out your name and email address, and that will automatically take you to the course. So that is the bonus. Thank you for staying to the end, and watch the email when it comes out. I always want to end on a quote, and my quote for today is, "A year from now, you will wish you had started today." Now that's true for many things, but especially with taxes. Remember I talked about the story at the beginning where the girl came to me, and she was a beautiful young lady, and it was so sad because she paid too much taxes. And because she didn't start it before tax season, you want to make sure that you start today, and you will inevitably pay way less tax at the end of the year. So do it today. That's it for me for this webinar. I thank you so much for being here. That's my website, linweb.ca. Feel free to reach out. All of the resources you have will be there. Stay touched. Everybody, regardless of whether you signed up or not, you're going to get an email that will have the link to replay this webinar. But you also, if you have signed up for notifications, we will make sure that we send you anytime we have upcoming webinars or upcoming courses or regulatory things or things which are important to you. So we will see you soon, hopefully in one of our webinars. Thanks so much. See you later. Bye-bye.